Hello, world and universe. Welcome to the Trevor Donald Experience. Manifest your truth. And if you're new to the channel, please hit that like and subscribe button. And for all my continued followers, I want to say thank you. And this is an opinion-based video channel where I try to open your eyes and ears up to some of the travails and tribulations that take place throughout our cities, our states, our country, and sometimes around the world. And I got to go back to my heartfelt city of Chicago. And I've been saying this incessantly on many of my videos about Chicago becoming a sanctuary city and what has taken place in places like Chicago, New York, Denver, Colorado, Aurora, Colorado, certain parts of Atlanta, Georgia, that have become migrant sanctuary cities. And I've said this incessantly that with our governmental system not having a plan with all of these migrants that have entered our country on what we were going to do with them and have systems in place, when you have millions of non-speaking migrants that came over here with just the clothes on their backs, there was no housing, there were no vouchers, there were no social services adequately ascertained for these individuals. What do human beings do? They will acclimate themselves to their environment, and they will do whatever it takes by any means necessary. And if you're on the streets, what is the first thing you'll do? You will possibly commit crimes. I also said from the very beginning, and what I've seen being from the south side of Chicago, is that the gang membership was going to have a major uptick, especially in Hispanic or Latin gangs. And it sounds like this is what is taking place in Chicago. When you have placed many of these migrants in poor, dilapidated cities that have already, the citizens are already suffering, and then you topple it with this illegal migrant situation, you got poverty versus poverty. I'm sure there's been a major uptick in New York. There are gangs everywhere, in New York City, of course, in Los Angeles. But I got to tell you this story in Chicago, and they are reaching a boiling point on the streets that can turn into some real unrest. So let's get into it. Chicago gangbangers rage against newly arrived Venezuelan migrants as Tren de Aragua gangs uptick. Venezuelan super gang Tren de Aragua finally finds a challenger in America as ex-con warns one the city of Chicago is about to go up in flames. Venezuelan mobsters Tren de Aragua may have finally met their match in Southside Chicago gangs amid fears the city could go up in flames if they go to war. So we're talking about a public safety issue. We're talking about assaults. We're talking about gun violence. We're talking about even murder. The gang, referred to as TDA by federal authorities, has seeped into the U.S. in recent years, hidden among the 1 million Venezuelans to arrive under the Biden administration. Best known for selling women and children into Essex slavery and exploiting their own countrymen, the TDA most recently made headlines in Aurora, Colorado, where the armed thugs have committed shootings, assaults, and have taken over an apartment complex, allegedly. Even Donald Trump has taken notice, having promised a visit to Aurora while on the campaign trail, where local authorities will brief him on the recent arrest of the several gang members. Now they appear to have moved to Chicago, and ex-con Tyrone Muhammad is sounding the alarm. Muhammad, who served 20 years in state prison for murder, says the native gangs like the Gangster Disciples, Black P. Stones, the Vice Lords, Latin Kings, and Satan disciples may take up arms against TDA. When the black gangs here get fed up with the illegalities and criminal activities of these migrants or non-citizens, the city of Chicago is going to go up in flames, and there will be nothing the National Guard or the government can do about it when the bloodshed hits the streets. It'll be blacks against migrants, Muhammad said. Muhammad, since getting out of prison, has cleared up his act and became a leader of Ex-Cons for Community and Social Change, a group that patrols the dangerous streets of Chicago's South Side. He says the locals are irate over the migrant community as a whole has started to take over the Windy City. He said it is impossible to release gang members and criminals into our country through the borders and broken walls and infiltrate them in our communities that's already impoverished and broken, Muhammad tells the New York Post. The city's taxpayers have doled out just under $150 million on migrant-related expenses since August 2022. Some of those are reportedly going to members of the Tren de Aragua gangs, TDA, with many getting government benefits, EBT cards, and even pushing black tenants out of apartments because the city will pay landlords more for housing the migrants. Now in major American cities, listen to this, TDA has unleashed a crime wave from Miami to New York, and Muhammad and local activist Terry Newsom have uncovered crimes as extreme as child P, drugs, and SX trafficking through the Freedom of Information Act requests. One was even released by a Chicago judge after being detained by ICE before being involved in a jewelry heist in Denver a month ago. So he allegedly committed a crime in Denver, and then ICE let him out and he goes to Chicago. In July, a commuter was viciously attacked by thieves who choked him unconscious and rifled through his pockets on a Chicago transit system called the L. Many of the gangsters themselves are furious that TDA, which they see as a terrorist group, has been allowed in and taken away benefits that citizens have been getting. Muhammad is now organizing for Donald Trump and the Republican Party in November's election, forming a group called Ex-Cons for Trump. He wants the Democratic Party to know how sick they are of the left using their votes and then giving benefits to migrants like these vicious gangsters. He says it's not so much Trump himself, it's that the Democrats are selling us down the river. The bougie blacks might like Kamala Harris, but she doesn't do anything for us anyway. It comes as TDA has started to make national headlines for what it's done, largely across the American Southwest. So this panacea of crimes that is taking place allegedly by this group, TDA, it may start in one city, but it is going to swipe across the country, and public safety will become a real issue, and gang violence. TDA has taken over at least 3 apartment buildings in Aurora, Colorado, allegedly, exploiting and terrorizing their migrant neighbors. A bombshell report by a law firm that represents one of the apartment management companies says assaults, threats of murder, extortion, and even child P is possibly taking place. Earlier in September, the Aurora Police Department announced the arrest of 10 TDA members, despite having previously denied that there was a gang problem. Bombshell documents obtained by Daily Mail proves leaders in Aurora knew the gang had taken control of the 3 apartment buildings. TDA has been described as the epitome of evil and is best known in their homeland for sex trafficking of girls and women and exploiting their fellow countrymen, have now set up strongholds in Denver, New York, Miami, El Paso, Chicago, and Dallas. Since arriving in the United States, TDA, the gang group, is accused of taking part in shootings, shakedowns of other migrants who were told to pay rent to the gang instead of the property managers. They're involved in beatings and robberies in Colorado. Federal law enforcement has been shocked and taken off guard by how quickly the TDA gang has been able to establish itself and eclipse the previous operations set up by gangs like MS-13. In July, the federal government designated TDA as a transnational criminal organization, or TCO, putting them on the level among the worst Mexican drug cartels and terrorist organizations in the world. For now, TDA seems focused on victimizing the migrants, using migrant women into sex work, but it's only a matter of time before their tentacles spread across this country. As DailyMail.com exclusively reported, TDA has set up its new headquarters just across the border from El Paso in Juarez, Mexico. El Paso officials, who asked to remain anonymous, now fear gang violence will spill over into Texas' sixth largest city, which is currently ranked among the top 10 safest places to live in America by the FBI. Tren de Aragua, TDA, is the epitome of evil, Congressman Tony Gonzalez, who represents El Paso, said. This gang is known for arring children, spearheading murders, and cause widespread chaos. Law enforcement in El Paso is currently working on a confidential plan to address the growing threat. But Mexican authorities have been willing to speak more openly about TDA's troubling arrival in Juarez. The presence of the Venezuelan mob in Mexico has caused panic among migrants, many of whom are fleeing the very violence TDA created in their homeland. It says Trump has taken notice, having promised to visit Aurora soon to talk about the problem and elaborate on his plans to stop America's crisis at the border. This is very important. I've been talking about this from day one, especially in Chicago, which has a history of black gangs first and foremost, and then you pull and bring and make Chicago a migrant city, which has already been inundated with problems for decades, and you dump them on the poor side of the south side of Chicago. You have poverty versus poverty. You have extreme poverty versus current living poverty. The extreme poverty is the illegal migrants that are here that have nothing, and the current poverty or sustainable poverty is the black folks that have been living off the system for generation after generation. There has to be accountability on both sides, on three sides, on the four sides: the state, the national government, the state government, the black folks on the south side of Chicago. This is what you get. If you live off the system your entire life, at some point the system is going to let you down. We should be instead of always having our hand out, as Malcolm X once said, and looking for the American system to save us, we have to save ourselves. They're not dumping these migrants in the northwest suburbs, the south suburbs, or any suburban area in any of these cities. They're dumping them right in these poor, dilapidated communities. And it's very important, even if your city is not a migrant city, there have been tons of mayors who said they will welcome these illegal migrants, they will become a sanctuary city. But before these other mayors in these other cities decide to do that, take a look at what's taking place in New York, in Chicago, in Aurora, Colorado. Look at what is happening in the state of California that has been decimated with liberal laws and property damage, assaults, gun violence, murders. Look at what is taking place, and that's in the entire state of California. Look at what's taking place in the borders of Arizona, what's taking place in Texas. There is going to be an uptick in gang membership and an uptick in gang violence if we don't get this under control. Chicago is in the middle of our country. It's almost the heartbeat of America. It's the third or fourth largest city in America. And this is just a template for what can take place throughout our entire country if we don't get this under control. Chicago is in a $1 billion budget deficit as of right now. They have spent a ton of energy and money toward this migrant issue and have turned their backs on the citizenry of the people that live in Chicago and have been here for decades. And now Chicago is down 1,000 police officers. That's a public safety issue. Chicago is down several hundred correctional officers in Cook County Jail alone. Public safety is at a breaking point in Chicago and across our cities and states in America. We have to do something about this. And if there's going to be a racial component to this uptick in this Venezuelan gangs versus black gangs, that's going to make this scenario even worse. What does that say for your public transportation system, your CTA, the bus line, the the train line in Chicago? It is going to be unsafe to even leave your home. People want to leave their home, go to work, and then come back home safely. Look at what's happening on the subway system in New York City. There are assaults and debauchery happening each and every day. And now this migrant influx is making it even worse. Tell me what you think about this potential boiling point that's taking place with this uptick in this gang TDA, this Venezuelan gang membership that is bringing nothing but immoral and unethical and inhumane circumstances to many of these cities that are already troubled. And you're going to have a rumbling in the streets if we don't get this under control. Chicago is on a breaking point at this particular time, and we need to pray for that city each and every day. And they're just a moniker of what could happen in your city and across the country. Tell me what you think. This has been the Trevor Donald Experience. Manifest your truth in a positive, righteous, and God-fearing way.